This is your spiritual game plan, and I am your host, Sherry Fletcher. Change, it happens to all of us. You've invested your time and energy into an important role, sometimes for years, and then suddenly it's time for you to move on. Maybe you've worked hard on a dream, and now your path is taking a new turn, but the dream isn't going with you. Perhaps you've raised your kids and they've moved on, but now your empty nest is filled with parent care. Or maybe you're in the middle of diaper changes and laundry piles. If you find yourself asking questions like, where do I fit in anymore? Am I even relevant? How do I find my purpose now? You are in the right place. This is a show for women in a season of transition. I believe that while your roles in life will change, your purpose is eternal. I'm here to help you understand just how intentionally you were made by a creator with a game plan. Through interviews and inspirational guests, we'll discover ways to help you unlock the purpose God placed in you, develop a game plan for your life calling, and embrace the intentional masterpiece you were created to be. Today, I'll be speaking with Amy Connell, host of the Graced Health podcast. Amy is passionate about women knowing that their eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. They just need to be able to do what they are called to do. She's a fitness enthusiast, runner, certified personal trainer, and an imperfect eater living in perfect grace. Today, we will be discussing how to care for our bodies so that we can do what God has called us to do. And Amy will remind us that our body does have a purpose, but it is not so it can look a certain way or be a certain size. Amy, I am so glad you're joining me today. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Sherry. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I enjoy seeing the sunshine in your room because I know you just got rid of the storm in Texas.
Yes, the sunshine is very needed, and I'm very grateful for it, even though it's intruding on my face right now.
Well, it's better than a snowstorm, so I'm glad that you're doing well. So, Amy, I got to meet you through Kathy Lipp, and we met in person at a speakers conference, and that was such a treat. And since then, I have loved following your ministry, and so I wanted to introduce you to my listeners today. So, we just give a little bit about you, your family, the ministry, and the new book you're writing.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for having me on. And I just love how God has used technology to bring people like us together. I think we bonded over a couple things. And so, yeah, it's really fun to have this relationship, even though we live in different places. I do live in the Houston, Texas area. So yes, we are coming out of, I don't even know what we're calling it, like 𝗁𝗵𝗶, 𝗁𝗵𝗶. I don't know, but it was quite a week last week. I live here with my husband of 23 years and who I like to describe as my two always hungry teen boys. I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, both boys, both athletes, both eat copious amounts of food. And then I have a stray turned princess pit bull named Grace. So that is my brood here in the Houston area. And I am the host of the Graced Health podcast, which is also a ministry that I've had since 2016. And the ministry has kind of taken on a little bit of different paths, just like God calls us on different things. I started off purely talking about body image because this was something I really struggled with. And it has evolved and morphed into really equipping women with simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves. The biggest compliment I ever got from someone on the podcast was she listened and she said, "You just make me feel like it doesn't have to be perfect."
Oh,
And
that's
so
awesome.
I know. That was so good because that's really what I want people to know. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to follow all the rules, which we'll get into later. But that's kind of where I am now. So yeah, I started off blogging. I now have the podcasting. I love podcasting so much. It's so fun to meet, like just like this. And I am I have written I don't know. This is my first thing, so I'm like very, very green at it. Like, do I call it a manuscript? Do I call it a book? I don't know what process it is, but I have something that I'm hoping to publish as a book in November. And this is probably news to you, 𝗫𝗫ry, because I just changed the title.
Oh,
Yeah, because that's what you do, I guess. So the new title is called Your Worthy Body: Find Freedom in Health by Breaking All the Rules.
love that.
So the whole concept is taking all of these rules that many of us have grown up with. Many of us feel like we have to abide by in order to have the quote unquote perfect health. And yes, I'm using those air quotes. And it really breaks them using exercise science, using nutrition science, using scripture. That's a really big part of it for me. And that is coming out hopefully in November.
That is exciting. I like the new title.
Thanks.
Yes. So I like to ask a couple fun facts before we jump into today's topic. And I heard you talk about your favorite fueling food, as you call it. You said it helps you sleep better and run better. So I've got to start eating more of it. But growing up, I did not like them. My mom would make them and I was like, which is what my kids do today, even though they're grown and gone. If they come home and I make them, they're like, really? So I would love for you to tell me about your favorite fueling food and why it is so good for you.
Yes. Well, it's funny that you share that story. My favorite fueling food, and really actually one of my foods in general, is sweet potatoes. And it's funny you say that because I used to give my son, I either mashed up sweet potatoes or just buy it, depending on how much time I had. And he would throw up like every time. And this 17-year-old kid still does not like sweet potatoes. Like it just like he cannot get it down. So I don't understand why. However, I do love them. And I don't know that I can put a particular reason on why I think they're so good. I will say they have a lot of vitamins and nutrients in it that, yes, you can get from supplements, but I think that the best way to take our vitamins and our nutrients is in the form that God gave them to us. So the sweet potato, it is wonderful. It has a lot of fiber in it. It promotes gut health. I think the reason that it does so many great things for my body is it has a lot of potassium in it. I have high blood pressure, and without going into too much of the exercise science, your cells, the fluid in your cells, have mostly sodium and potassium in it. So when I sweat, I'm sweating out a lot of potassium, and low potassium can cause high blood pressure. And then if you're on blood pressure medication, like I am, then because it's a diuretic, if you're on a diuretic, that can cause you to lose the fluid in your cells, which is low potassium. So this is something I've been kind of battling a little bit lately. And I've been really intentional about like, this is not an option. I'm eating a sweet potato every day. And I'll tell you, I don't know, if you don't like it or if your kids don't like it, this is what I do. I get a medium-sized sweet potato and then I slice it like into medallions, and then put it in my toaster oven. I just spray a little bit of olive oil on it, put a little bit of salt. Don't get onto me because I have the salt and the high blood pressure.
Not getting on you.
I know. And then I just cook it at like 400 degrees for 25-ish minutes, depending on how big they are. And then I put a little bit of peanut butter on it. And it's such a fun treat. Why are you looking at me?
I'm a peanut butter fanatic, but that one's new. Peanut butter.
That face. I wish people could see that face.
Oh, they will if they watch it on YouTube.
Okay, if you're listening on a podcast, that's totally worth going and watching the YouTube.
Oh, wow.
But no, it's really good. It's really good. So that is my favorite way to eat them if I'm just making it for myself.
I will try it and I'll come back on and tell people what I think.
Okay. And why do they make me? I don't know why it makes me sleep better, but it just does.
Yeah.
It just does.
Well, one time I did make sweet potatoes and my kids liked it. I spiralized them.
Okay.
I spiralized them and then put a little bit of olive oil and kind of ran my hands through it with some salt and pepper and put it on a cooking sheet and kind of crisped it. Oh. That's the one time. I guess I need to spiralize them.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to try that. I haven't tried that. My friend Tamara, I'm going to have to pass that along to her. She spiralizes everything. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So I ask this question of every guest that comes on. Looking back in your life, how far back can you see the very purpose you are living out today in who you have always been?
Sherry, it's funny. So I'm a regular listener of your show, and I've heard you ask this question before, and it's made me think, and I've never really been able to figure out exactly the answer. However, I can tell you a few little things that I think have intersected into the calling that God has me in right now. One is I grew up dancing. So I took my first tap and ballet class when I was 6 years old, and ended up doing tap and jazz and dance team in high school and all of that kind of stuff. And somewhere around in middle school, I found my production, my stage presence, I guess is a better way of saying it. And I remember going out to a dance competition and just lit up, and I was raising my eyebrows and hamming it up. And I remember my dance teacher looked back at my mom. She was like, "Where did that come from?" And mom was like, "I don't know." But all of a sudden, just finding that place of just joy and having fun and moving my body while being in front of people. And then sometime around that time, I also have this memory of being you remember lock-ins that like church youth groups used to have? I don't know if they still have them or not,
Yeah.
but I was at this church lock-in, like at our local YMCA with a girlfriend, and, or my friend was there. There, obviously our whole youth group was there. And I remember thinking, I want to write a book one day. And I told her that. And she said, "Well, let's go tell," I think her name was Ruth. I don't remember, like one of the leaders. And she said, "Well, Amy, tell her what you wanted to say." And I said, "Well, I want to write a book one day." And she's like, "Oh, that's great. What do you want to write a book about?" And I was like, and I really don't remember what the answer is. I wish I could tell you, but it wasn't anything fantastic, whatever. But there was that seed that was planted then. And then I think the other little dot out there in the world that God has kind of planted that seed is I took a speech class in college because most of us were required, and I loved it. I loved that class and got a lot of affirmation from my teacher, and thought I would really love to do this, but I have no story. I just didn't think that I had any compelling reason to get up and speak. So here I am 25 years later and kind of using a mix of all three of those.
I
But
love that.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, it's not, I wish I could say that I, lined up my stuffed animals and taught them about fitness and pushing up, push-ups and that kind of stuff. But I feel like I wear a lot of hats in what I do, but those are kind of three moments that God has planted a seed that he grew in his time.
Absolutely. I love thinking back to the little girl dancing. So that movement that God put in you, but now you're working with young girls. Yeah. And I just love that correlation and teaching them to move. And so I always like hearing the stories. So thank you.
Well, you know what? I hadn't put that together. So thank you for that.
Oh. Well, my pleasure. So you and I have a story that I'm guessing women that are listening will relate to. And that is different times in our lives where we just obsess over body image. Mm-hmm. And I will admit, I still catch myself loathing the topic. And I do not even like to clothes shop because of it. So I would say that sometimes I can believe that my obsession in body image could even become an idol because I'm so focused on that versus what God has called me to do. So I would love it if you would start us off with a little bit about your own battle and how God used that now to minister to others.
Well, Sherry, I am right there with you. I mean, I have battled that for as long as I can remember, quite honestly. I mean, at least going back to late middle school. And I can kind of go through the decades of oh gosh, I wish I looked better in this, cheerleading uniform or the dance team outfit. In my 20s, I like to tell people that I wanted to have abs worthy enough of having a belly button ring. and I never got one. I wanted to be a hot mom. I had my kids 20 months apart, and then I just kind of wanted to be that mom who had a really rockin' body, even though she had, 2 kids on her hips. Um, and then I just really turned into this, just having a really huge obsession with movement and, yeah, looking a certain way. And it really took up a lot of my headspace. And quite honestly, I can still revert back to that. I mean, even though this is kind of what I'm talking about all the time, it's not because I have conquered it. It's because it is something that I fight, and I understand. I definitely understand the battle. And I think really the beginning of my change, which was not immediate, but the beginning was God really whispered to me one time, "You're thinking more about the food you're going to eat and your exercise than you are about me." And that I still like I still don't quite have the words to describe that, because it was like, I really am like, this has turned into an idol. It's turned into an idol of how many hours of exercise can I do. It's turned into an idol of, you know, how often, how often I'm weighing, how does my body look? And so, yeah, that's definitely a challenge that I have battled in the past. I think my growing faith at the time that I heard that whisper is really what enabled me to hear that. And then God is the one who keeps pulling me out of that.
Yeah. So many times Satan attacks exactly what God calls.
Mhm.
So wherever God calls you to lead, that's exactly where Satan is going to parallel right there. And so, what God needed you to turn to glorify him, Satan was constantly trying to get you to aim it on glorifying you.
Yeah.
And so just hearing that. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, the enemy really knows how to distract us from what God is wanting us to do. And for me, it was a huge distraction, because if I'm thinking about myself, I'm not thinking as much about others and how to love and serve them with my body, with what I
Yeah.
have, what I've been given. So yeah, I definitely think that that is a tactic that is used, and it's really easy to not, to forget that that might be him that is saying, oh, gosh, the scale should have said this, or, these pants used to fit, or whatever.
Yes. Yes. So I love talking about purpose.
Mhm.
And you have a line that really, I'm going to tape this up above my scale. I'm going to tape it on my fridge. I love this. You say, take care of our bodies so that we can do what we are called to do, not so it will look a certain way. And so I had never really thought, I talk about our purpose is how we serve others, but we've got to be able to serve others in our calling. And so our body as a whole, mind and spirit and everything, that keeping it in good health so that we can serve. And I don't know if you saw this meme. Heather Creekmore actually put it out on her Instagram. It is a sweet grandma knitting, and it says, "Tell me, sweetie," something like, "I used to tell me how good it." I'm going to mess it up. But anyways, this granny knitting saying something like, "Yeah, I was hot when I was your age." And I'm thinking, yeah, what's it going to matter? All these years I
Yeah.
focused on how I looked. When I'm that age, what do I want to look back on?
Yeah.
My life. And I just saw that meme and I thought, wow, that's really powerful. So take care of our bodies so that we can do what we're called to do and not so we can look a certain way. Unpack all of that for us.
Boy, yeah, that is really huge. And it's funny you mentioned, I have not seen Heather's meme, but I do adore her and her ministry. So I'll have to go look at that. Um, I had this realization several years ago that, you've always heard this analogy that, oh, no one has ever, it's not an analogy, it's a saying, I guess, but no one has ever been on their deathbed and wished that they had worked more and spent less time at home. I realized I doubt there's very few people who are laying on their deathbed thinking, man, my life would have been so much better if I'd been 5 pounds less, 10 pounds less, one size
Yeah.
less.
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just not that important in the scheme of things. And I understand it does feel important sometimes.
Yeah.
The whole concept of we take care of our bodies so we can do what we're called to do is not something that I came up with. It was actually through a sermon that a pastor at my pastor at the time had said, and it was mind blowing to me. And as I have meditated on this, and as I have kind of grown to understand this a little bit more, I think that there are a lot of different ways to look at it, but one of it is, what's our calling? And I know that this is a huge, focus of this podcast is, understanding your purpose. And I think one thing that's important to remember is our calling can be different. And, I came up with 5 different, and that doesn't mean that there's only 5, but there's, what I call the macro calling. So that's like Moses in the burning bush, go save the people, yeah, or free the people. So that's a really big one. And I think that that's what a lot of us think of when we think of, well, what's my calling? But there are some other ones too, like along those same lines of Moses. Well, there was Aaron, and Aaron was right by Moses' side. Aaron allowed him to be successful. He was his confidant. He was a mediator. He translated, if I'm remembering correctly. And so that's what I'm calling a servanthood calling. It might be that our calling is to support someone for for God's purpose for them as well. And there is nothing, I mean, think about how important Aaron was.
Absolutely.
There's other things that I like, a micro calling. So that's like what today in this little moment. So like, for example, I had lunch before I got on here. And I know that if I have a super, carbolicious lunch without, and like with the refined stuff and the processed stuff, I'm not going to feel well. If I eat particular things, I'm not going to feel well. And then I'm not going to feel my best mentally and physically to have this conversation with you. And so these little bitty things throughout the day, one thing in my life that I've really had to overcome is knowing that if I just totally burn myself out in the gym or exercising or going, I'm not running as much anymore, but when I would go on these really long runs, I still have to have enough energy to be a good mom and to be a good wife. And so if I use all that's in my energy tank, I'm not fulfilling that little micro calling for the day. Other callings that I like to remind people that they may have is like a creative calling. I think we saw a lot of this during COVID. I mean, if you were a seamstress and you could sew, what a beautiful, wonderful way to bless others was, making those masks. There's one more, and I am blanking. Oh, and a seasonal calling. So again, really specific to your community. I mean, there are times that God may have us doing something right now, and he may not have us doing that 6 months from now, a year from now, 10. I mean, and I realize that what I'm doing right now, I think is probably a seasonal calling that'll last 10 years. I just can't imagine doing this when I'm 60, but maybe, I don't know. I'm 46, so, who knows? But I think remembering that farther purpose of why we're taking care of our bodies, because God does have plans for us, and he does need us to use those bodies to do whatever that is. And only, that's between you and him. But our body does have a purpose, but it's not so it can look a certain way. And maybe someone listening was called to be a model, but I was not. And so I don't have to look like one.
What? Well, we were called to be a model.
Well, a model of Christ.
There you go.
Yes, that's very. That's
yes,
true.
I don't think I will be on any editions of summer beach attire. So I am terrible at counting calories and watching macros. I mean, if you ask our friend Candace, she'll say, yeah, Sherry never turned in her macro and calorie counting. And one of the reasons I just, maybe it's a mental thing, is because not if, but when I went over my allotted amount for the day, I would just beat myself up. And I love your title, Graced Health. Mm-hmm. So what is a grace-filled way to look at that kind of a thing where I'm like, okay, if I count my calories and I'm 5 calories over, I'm so bad. What's a grace-filled way to give myself grace in that mindset, but still stay on track?
Yes, it's complicated and it's hard and it's really hard to know. I mean, one thing I like to remind people is God has given us this body that can provide us so much feedback and a brain to make decisions about that. And I mean, I used to do the same thing. Like, so my personal thing is I track sometimes and sometimes I don't. I like to say I do um, more like informed intuitive eating. And, now that I know, so I had to go through this process of, learning kind of what works for my body right now at the age that I'm at, because it's different than it was 10 years ago. But I think we have to remember that our body can override anything that is sitting in our hand and the app that it tells us. I mean, first of all, if your app says you're 5 calories over and you're really, really hungry, well, that's your body knows better than the app. And so I think giving ourselves grace with that, and understanding too, just in general, it doesn't have to be perfect. Kind of like what I was saying was one of the very best compliments I've ever received is it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, Jesus doesn't expect us to be perfect. He came because he knows we are going to, we're going to sin. We're not always going to be right. And he died to give us grace. And he didn't just die to give us grace in yelling at our children or being snippy with our husbands or, maybe yelling at someone who cut you off in line. It's in everything. And so there are times, I don't know I can't speak for you, Sherry, but there are times I overeat. There are times I eat too much of the things I shouldn't be eating. And I can take that and say, okay, that was a mistake. Let's learn from that. What happened? Why did I do that? And then, go and sin no more, for lack of a better word. I can't remember what is that? The book of John, not the book of John. But the story of
the woman that was brought to Christ.
Right. Yeah. And anyway,
I
so
don't
he
condemn
said,
you.
right. And so, I think, I don't know why it's so hard to, as Christ followers, to give ourselves grace in this area. I really don't, but I think it's so hard for so many women because we're learning to give that in some of our other, maybe our personalities or the way we interact with others. But for some reason, we still hold ourselves to having this perfect eating, perfect body, perfect workouts, perfect macros. And it's okay if it's not, because what's perfect anyway?
Yeah.
Right? Like
No.
there's no BMI chart in the Bible.
Thank you.
God,
Yes.
I mean, God did not say thou shalt have a 23 BMI. And, I mean, like he didn't give us that. He said he has something, he said to, honor your temple. And he said he has purpose for us. And so it's important that we're able to do that. But he does not say that it is one, that, one size is what we're supposed to be.
Yeah, that is so freeing. That is.
Yeah, it is. It's a constant reminder. It is something
Right.
that I don't know about you, but it is something I still have to remind myself because, and again, I think some of it probably does go back to the enemy. And some of it's
Absolutely.
just our culture. I think, I mean, this is a much deeper conversation, but I don't think that other cultures have this as much, not only not in our country, but even within our country, there's just, we don't see this as much within some cultures as not, and I think that there hasn't been representation. There hasn't, I mean, anyway, that's probably more than you want to get into.
That's a good topic though. That's a good one. One time I was doing a study on Eve and I was thinking, the serpent is talking to her and she's standing there naked, talking to the serpent. She's standing there naked, but he doesn't say to her, if you eat this fruit, you will never have cellulite. He challenges her mind. He attacks her mind and her thought processes because he knows the minute he can get in her head, then the rest is easy peasy. he didn't say eat this fruit and your hips will shrink and all this will happen. And here she is, vulnerable, but he attacks her mind on how she sees herself, and that just really helped me a little bit
That's
with
so
that.
powerful, Sherry. That's so
But
true because, and it is our mind that drives so much of this. It's not
mhm,
necessarily, I mean, you hear about people all the time who you look at and you're like, man, she looks great. And then
mhm,
later you hear that she really struggled with this stuff as well. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's absolutely a battle within our mind.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we're talking on the other end of 2020, and I'll just say, I decided to embrace COVID-19 and gain the 19 pounds in honor of it. Um, so it wasn't great as far as staying on track with exercises. Gyms closed, and for a while, even though my running group wasn't meeting to run together, and you kind of, you break the pattern, the healthy pattern. And so, how do we get back on track after being so sedentary?
Yes, I think has been a challenge for a lot of people. Really, where I recommend to start, as a personal trainer, just put on your shoes and go for a walk. I mean, I think that is the absolute easiest, most effective way. Walking is a really underrated workout, especially as I'm getting older. I'm not running as much, and I can still achieve so many physical benefits from walking. That's really the first place that I would say. And then I would say at the same time, grab a friend if you can and go walk if you feel safe, if they're, take the precautions necessary. I was actually just listening to a podcast this morning. Dr. Sanjay Gupta was talking about how beneficial it is for your mind from an aging perspective, even just walking with a friend and having that connection. So that is the first place I would say to start, is just get out there and start moving. And then if you feel like you need more, take it up from there. Take it up from
Yeah.
there. And I would also say too, for your community, if they are wanting a little bit more, but like maybe their knees are, not really quite ready for, squats and lunges and stuff like that. I did just put together a program that's free, that's called Squat Free Strong Legs. So these are
Mm,
all things that you can do with a resistance loop, one of those like 12
yeah.
inch. And it strengthens like 7 different muscles, I think, around your lower body, and it can help kind of strengthen. So that would be a good stepping stone too into
Yeah.
like, I want to get stronger, but I'm not really ready for all of this.
Yeah. Is that a link on your website, or is that one of your
Yeah,
Instagram?
they can go to, I need to put it on my homepage, but it's gracehealth.com/stronglegs,
Okay.
all one word.
Yeah, and we'll have that in the show notes. And also we'll have Instagram, links to your Instagram, because you do such a great workout on the Instagram, and those have been very helpful, and I love watching you do that. So we'll put links on that. So on
Thanks.
the website, you also have a download with some rules that you give us permission to break. My favorite one that I like is, okay, I'll have this dessert and then I'll have to work it off. So what are some of the other wonderful rules that you're gonna give us to break?
Yes. Yeah. So that's actually, like I said, in this manuscript that I've been working on, that's the whole concept of it, is all these rules that we feel like we have to abide by, that has been put out there by either the fitness industry or BuzzFeed or the morning shows or even ourselves. And
Yeah.
it's time to break those, because they're actually not science sound. They're not bound by science. They're not scripturally sound. And yeah, it's time that we just stop with those. So yeah, one of them is, I have to work off dessert. Look, if you're going to have dessert, just enjoy it. Just savor it. Enjoy the moment. You're probably having it with someone you love or someone you enjoy. Like, there's a big component from your mental health about just having that time together. Now, if you know you're going to be having dessert, kind of plan for it. Maybe you don't have, as much sugar that day or something like that. Another one that just just makes me cringe up is no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
Stop saying this. No, this is not true. I understand. I think the genesis of this was it like if you're not feeling soreness the next day. But soreness is not pain. Soreness is a reminder of your hard work. If you are feeling pain when you're working out, particularly if it continues, that's a gift. That's your body's signal, and it's communicating with you that something's not right. And then it's okay, is this something you can take care of yourself? Is it something that you can have a medical professional take care of, help you with? So pain is not okay, and we can be strong, we can be healthy, we can be fit, we can move well without pain. So let's get that out of our head. We don't have to have pain to reach our goals. Another one, I'm trying to think about like other ones that I really, well, here's one. I have to get my hour of exercise in.
Yeah. Oh,
so I think this is my theory. I think this comes from gyms and their group fitness schedules, because they've got to schedule something and they've got to get things on the calendar. And so they go in and class starts at 5:30 p.m. and it ends at 6:25 p.m. so we can get the 6:30 people in, and it will end at 7:30 or 7:25, and it goes from there. And we just have in our head that we have to work out an hour, and we have to sweat, and we have to huff and puff, and we have to be red-faced, and that's not necessarily the case. And Sherry, I know you have a lot of knowledge from a physical therapy standpoint, because you have a parent who's a physical therapist, but there's a lot of benefit in taking it down, doing mobility type exercises, doing yoga type movements. And that will make you stronger in what you do. And it can be 30 minutes. Most of my gym workouts are probably 30 minutes. And in fact, I did one the other day that was 55 minutes. I'm like, this is so long. It was a great workout. I am not used to working out this long, man. So
I love hearing that from you.
Oh yeah. You just get conditioned, but it's, what are my goals? My goals are to be healthy. My goals are to be able to move for the rest of my life with joy in ways that I want to. My goal is not to win a fitness competition. My goal is not to win the Olympics. It's just to be able to move my body. And that's so freeing too, because then once we realize that our goal is not to be the whatever superlative, best or fastest or most or whatever, then we can move in a way that works best for us.
Yeah. It's so freeing. That's what I just love about your message. Your whole philosophy is just so, it doesn't give us excuse to not take care of our bodies, but it gives us the freedom to have a different mindset on how we take care of our bodies. And I love it. So I would love it if you would close with the Bible verse that helps you, that you really like. And I would love you to share it, because I know it'll encourage my listeners.
Sure. Absolutely. One of I kind of go in phases, but one of the meaningful ones to me is 2 Corinthians 10:5, that says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So when those negative thoughts come in, when that, when the enemy starts working with my mind, it's okay. Is this in line with Jesus? And if it's not, that's when you take it captive, and it's like, okay, no, this is not how it's going to be, and then kind of reframe those thoughts. I think we are learning more and more about the benefits of positive thinking and how that translates to almost every aspect of our body. And I think that starts with capturing those negative thoughts and recognizing what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. I have loved talking with you today, and I know the listeners have been thoroughly blessed. And like we mentioned, all the links to be able to find the downloads and your social media is going to be in the show notes, but we'll look forward to your book coming out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sherry. I always love talking with you.
Okay, are you just as thrilled as I am to be reminded that there are no BMI charts in the Bible? But I will say that the BMI that I need to work on is being made in His image. If you want to connect with Amy and get the downloads that were mentioned today in our podcast, you will find all of the information in the show notes. If you have not subscribed to this podcast, please do so. That way, you will not miss up-and-coming episodes. And when you leave a rating and a review, that helps me serve you better, as well as helps others find the podcast. During today's episode, did a friend come to mind who you know would be blessed by this message? If so, would you share this link with them? Listeners like you sharing links with others is how this podcast can reach more people. I'd also love to have you subscribe to my email list. I will send a weekly update with a little more of a personal touch and information about new episodes before they come out. Thank you so much for tuning into Your Spiritual Game Plan, the podcast that helps you understand God has a plan and you have a purpose in it.